Hey everybody, welcome to our second episode of our webinar series. I'm Heather, the Digital Strategy Supervisor.
And I'm Tanner, the Senior Media Specialist here at Raindrop.
And we're here to talk about how to scale your business with edutainment and why creative paired with a strategic distribution strategy is key to your success.
Now a little about us. My role here at Raindrop entails everything from behind-the-scenes media buying to client-facing reporting, as well as strategy. I take the ads that we shoot in-house with our full creative team, and I take those and I basically put them out on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and other paid media channels for the world to see. Prior to Raindrop, I was on the online advertising team at Intuit, which is a software company that made TurboTax and Quicken and Mint and other software products. I worked across different online advertising channels like SEO, affiliate, mobile, and email marketing. I also worked on projects like the 2017 Super Bowl commercial for Intuit TurboTax. After my time at Intuit, I worked at a San Diego D2C supplement company called Organifi, where I ran the YouTube and Facebook marketing funnels.
So I work closely here to lead strategy for all of our direct-to-consumer accounts. I've been working in e-commerce and marketing for 10 years now and have had the chance to work on brands like ASICS, WD-40, Titleist, Cannondale Bikes, and many, many more. In my experience, I've had the chance to oversee all of marketing from R&D and how you're positioning a product to how you're actually launching that across digital channels and what digital channels come into play. I've also had the chance to oversee creative teams and also lead the execution of all of our product launches and marketing campaigns.
Let's get down to the nuts and bolts. So Heather, when you're working with a brand, what is the first piece of advice that you have them think about or that you give to them when it comes to thinking about creative?
Yeah, definitely. So the first and foremost, most important piece of any creative strategy is understanding your audience. If you don't understand your audience, how are you even going to market to them, right?
True.
So there's a ton of work and exercises that you can do prior to coming up with a creative strategy or positioning that's going to set you up for success. The interesting thing about marketing is that it uses a ton of psychology, and it's really fascinating and interesting to hear what people are talking about. What are they interested in? What are they actually passionate about? You can use all of those inputs and then fuel your creative messaging and speak directly to that person's problem in your video content. So sometimes there's a lot of missteps that can happen if someone paints the ideal picture of a persona first without even knowing who's buying their product. If you're creating a brand for the first time, you're usually painting this really detailed picture of who this person is, but actually who can be buying your product will be so different later on once you finally have a product that launches. So a few things that you can do now and after you have more of that audience information is to go back and look at what they're interested in, what content and brands are they passionate about, where are they watching and viewing content online? Is it YouTube or is it Netflix or Hulu? All of those inputs can be really beneficial when crafting your channel strategy in the future. So a lot of times as marketers, we tend to use fluffy language, right? But my rule is always speak to someone like they're a kindergartner. You just want to be very direct and very clear in your messaging and communication. Brand marketing and messaging and copy is so imperative and important, but you always want to think about, is this actually something that the consumer is going to understand? Am I talking to them in the way that they're hearing me, right? So think about all of that and try to be very cognizant of clear messaging in your marketing.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back to the old saying of that KISS, where it's keep it simple, stupid. And that plays a role here too.
Absolutely.
All right. So Heather, once you have gotten into the weeds and discussed with a brand of how they can understand their audience, what are some ways that these brands or that we help brands here at Raindrop really research their audience and understand who they're targeting?
Yeah, so this can be a kind of long and tedious process, but it's very beneficial, and there's a few ways that we can go about this. So first, there's a ton of surveys and data that's at our fingertips that we can pay for. Granted, studies can be very expensive, but it's an option. There's other platforms like customer data platforms and software that basically takes a lot of third-party data and puts it up into the system and spits out information that you can then use. So there's some customer data platforms that you can use that basically take a bunch of third-party data and aggregate it together to tell you more about your customer. You can pay for these. There's also some free or less expensive tools that you can leverage. And then social listening tools are also very beneficial. This takes any mention of your brand or a string of keywords across blogs or forums or social media for any public profile and aggregates them together to give you a stream of conversations that people are having about your product or service. SEO tools are also really beneficial. We use SEMrush here at Raindrop, and we love using this because it can show you keyword volume for your competitors and also for terms that you're trying to market with.
So what are some of your favorite free tools that we tend to use here at Raindrop?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can survey our customers. That's definitely the most easy and simple way to go about things, but you can send post-purchase surveys and basically ask consumers questions about your product and what they love so much about it or what they need more from you as a brand. Google Trends is also fascinating.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's one of our favorites, and we love to see the spike in mentions for a certain term that we're looking for. Like you can see over a course of a year, even more, there's a term that spikes in popularity, or compare that to other terms that you're considering using in your marketing to see what people are actually looking for right now. A few other ones are Google Keyword Planner. That's a free tool that we absolutely love and use. And then Answer the Public. Just go to answerthepublic.com. Little plug to them there. But this is also a nice tool that aggregates questions and queries that people are searching for on Google and gives you a ton of content ideas. My other favorite, this one can be a little more in the weeds and tedious, but looking at social media posts, just read what people are saying on Instagram or, YouTube or Facebook, for example. And you can even pull in your competitor channels and see how people are talking about competitors or what questions they're asking to your competition. That's a way to stay edgy and have a leg up in the game. Another really great one are forums like Reddit, and you can definitely go down a rabbit hole on Reddit. It's crazy how much conversation is happening there, but I always found it really useful. It's just you can type in a certain topic and you're just given threads of information to dig into and really see the language that people are using, I think is most important. And when they're writing paragraphs of content, that's just the best way to get to know your audience.
Yeah, Reddit is an interesting one, and like you said, you can go into a rabbit hole, but it's pretty incredible the amount of free information that is out there, and people within certain niches and different demographics where you can really do some digging and also look at the comments within those threads and pull some additional data.
Yeah. Another great tool are reviews. Definitely check out your reviews on your own website, and then also check out competitor reviews. What are people's pain points with the product now? What are pain points with the brand now, or their customer experience, which is first and foremost important. You can also use Amazon. There's so many products sold on Amazon. That's a great place to start. Even if you're in stage one of just creating your first e-commerce store, go to Amazon and read through all of those comments and the reviews that people are leaving to get a good understanding of what they really love about a certain product. And then the last one, podcasts. This is another secret tool, but if you're trying to learn more about a specific topic, go ahead and search that topic on just the podcast app on your phone. And there's so many conversations going on there and interviews with experts in that space where if you know nothing about something, you can dive in there and just listen to the way that they're talking to each other. And it's the fastest and quickest way, in my opinion, to get up to speed.
For sure. Yeah, and there's lots of great marketing podcasts that are out there where you can dig a little bit deeper and you can find those golden nuggets, even on topics related to this. So you can find there's something for every subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once you've identified your customer and you've done some research, how do you go about creating your brand message and getting out there to those customers?
Yeah, definitely. So at Raindrop, we take all of our clients through what's called a brand identity process. And this is an 8-question process that we usually set up in the beginning of any client relationship. And it's about 2 hours of a meeting. But what's really awesome is this is where you get those golden nuggets and what sets you apart from your competition. So how are you different from your competitors, and what is unique about you and your brand voice? Some things that it uncovers are the emotions that customers feel when interacting with your brand. Some examples of questions are, what emotions should customers feel or have when interacting with your brand? If the brand were an actor, who would the brand be and why? And other self-expressive benefits, like by wearing or purchasing your brand, what are customers saying about themselves? Like, what are those self-expressions by buying from you or being associated with your brand or product? So some examples of this, I'm outdoorsy by wearing Patagonia, or I'm economical by owning a Prius. I'm forward thinking by owning a Tesla. And then once this process is complete, we use it to drive all of our creative production in-house. So we formulate what's called a brand identity document, and there'll be some examples scrolling through on the screen. And this is the guiding light and the pinnacle for all of our brand messaging and copy throughout our relationship with our clients. And you always want to go back to this. It's a great reference point when you have new employees starting or you're generating a new marketing campaign or creative. You always have this brand identity to reference back to.
And Heather, speaking on the brand identity, do you ever find that shifting with clients?
Yeah, I think that it's always great to look back at your brand identity as you evolve and recognize what customers actually want or how their habits might change or their interactions with your product might change. Or let's say you come up with a new product line that's not necessarily within the same category, the same product line that you originally started with. You always want to check yourself and reference back. I think that these can be evolving. It's a great starting point to make sure that your messaging is consistent and cohesive. But go reference back after a year and ask yourself, has anything changed? Or as I'm learning more about what my audience is saying, is there a need to update this now?
Awesome. That's super helpful. So what types of creative do you see working now in today's environment?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely going to get into channel strategy specifically a bit later in our webinar, but let's talk through some of the video types that Raindrop is creating at the moment that we see as being very successful. So first, the talking head video. It's kind of like what we're doing right now, but this video is awesome because it uses talent. We're usually looking right at the camera and talking directly to it. And the awesome thing about these video types is that it creates that genuine connection with the audience. There's talent out there too that has such a high level of energy and they're interesting to watch. And for some reason, the viewer's just drawn into them. And then second, the animation or explainer video. So if you have a product demo that you're trying to explain how it works or showcase how it works, you can use different video footage like B-roll and then just put some simple copy overlay or motion graphics over that to highlight key points of your product and what it does. The third type is a slideshow or a mashup style video. So if you have a bank of footage already or UGC, you can stitch that together and create an awesome mashup. Even for customer testimonials, you can create a really highly impactful video, especially for middle of funnel or bottom of funnel content that we'll get into later. But that's an awesome video type that we love to leverage after we have some footage from our clients. The fourth video type that we create is a product demonstration video, and we do this for one of our companies that we work with that is actually a weighted jump rope. So there's a lot of neat features that go along with the jump rope, like the quick spinning handles, and you want to see actually how the workout app works as well. So we do a lot of product demo videos so people can get the experience of what the product's going to do for them and see it in motion. And then story videos. This is an approach we love to use. Jacques spoke a lot about this in the first episode of our webinar series, but for some of our clients like Works Tools, this is really, really awesome. We kind of set the tone with the problem right in the beginning and then take the customer through the story, you know, with some humor and things mixed in to keep your attention. But story videos are great for awareness. They're great for top of funnel, and they can initially connect you with the brand and then draw your attention in so that they can go explore more about the tool later or the product later on your website. And then from there, you can kind of get into your cross-channel marketing flow and start remarketing with other assets like I talked about a bit earlier.
So what are some of the main points that we look at when it comes to dissecting an ad?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about categories of creative. Now let's get into the ad itself. And the first and foremost, most important piece that we tell any of our clients is know what the offer is. Like, what are you offering to your customers in this advertisement? What is the goal of this ad? I think a lot of the time, if you're not thinking about that, you're getting distracted with creative and copy and everything's coming together separately, but it needs to be looked at as a holistic picture. And what are you trying to communicate to your audience right now? The first and foremost, what's the value add for people? Are you offering a free download, a free consultation? Is it a free webinar? Is it a 10% off discount? We definitely see that even something small like 10% is just enough to seal the deal when you're getting someone to buy your product for the first time. You don't always have to have an offer, but knowing your value propositions or what you're trying to communicate is really important. And then next, creative. So we all know how important creative is. We obviously work at a creative agency, but is it scroll stopping? Is it going to get you to stop and think for 2 seconds when you're on Facebook and social media and scrolling through your feed? Is there bright colors in use? Is there quick motion? What is it about that ad that is going to get you to pay attention? So next is the copy. It must be attention grabbing and must speak directly to what the consumer wants. We should know this already because of all the audience research that we did in the beginning, right? And because of the brand identity exercise and defining your value props and your messaging and your voice. But this needs to nail it on the head. Creative and copy is so important to an ad and how it's constructed and built, and can make all of the difference when all of the elements come together. Now the description of the ad, this is something that's right below the headline when you're viewing an ad on Facebook, but it's a nice place to add any extra value props, or if there's a limited time or exclusive offer, you want to be mentioning that there. It just gives you a little bit more real estate on the ad itself to communicate your messaging and the point. And finally, the CTA. Make sure that you're being really specific on what you're asking of the customer. Is it shop now? Is it learn more? Is it sign up? Just make sure that that's very clear and defined. Okay, so now that we've teed up the creative types that we usually create and what's working right now and how an ad is actually concocted and created, let's talk about how we get that creative and that content out across all digital channels. So Tanner, tell me about YouTube and Facebook.
The two primary channels that we're going to discuss today are Facebook and YouTube. With those, I always like to say, what good is a piece of creative if you distribute it to the wrong audience? Or better yet, what good is a piece of creative if you don't know how to distribute it? So imagine this, and a lot of our clients are in this boat prior to coming to us, but imagine you've hired a team of creatives and you've filmed the most amazing, most viral asset ever. It's the best thing that has ever been created. Now imagine, once this piece of creative is finished, you don't know where to distribute it, you don't know who to show it to, you don't know how to generate likes, clicks, shares, comments, virality, and most importantly, you don't know how to generate sales from it. Now, the question becomes, is that still the best piece of creative ever? When I think about this scenario, I think about the saying, when a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it actually make a sound?
That's an interesting quote. Who came up with that?
I know, right?
Why is digital marketing so important?
Because we need to get the right piece of creative with the right copy in front of the right audience. Now I'm going to take you through 3 steps that we use and that we take a look at for taking your creative or a client's creative and putting them into action and in front of the right people. So the 3 strategies that we use to get our creative in front of the right audiences are: we identify the audience, we identify their pain points, and we use an omni-channel approach to reach the audiences across different platforms, whether that's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever it may be. When you're using an omni-channel approach, each channel supports the other.
Yeah, I love the way that we think about that, because I think a lot of marketers get really stuck on one channel alone. And yes, like we all know that Facebook is amazing for capturing new audiences. Like that's the number one place people usually go when they're trying to acquire new customers. But there's ways to leverage Facebook with Google Shopping or with search or with YouTube that's actually going to help you get more bang for your marketing buck, and just be more effective in the long run.
Totally. And we often see with clients that when we have an omni-channel approach and when we're marketing on Google Shopping, when they have email drip campaigns set and in place to fire, and we're acquiring customers, let's say on Facebook, all of those channels support one another, and you can see basically the journey between the paths, and that brings up the whole discussion of attribution as well, which is fun to get into.
Oh, yeah.
So, Heather, as you mentioned, and as our viewers who are watching this are tuning in and pulling little bits from this, we've obviously defined that if you don't define who your target audience is, it's a recipe for disaster, and it could be a waste of time, a waste of resources, and most of all, a waste of dollars at the end of the day. So hopefully the tips that we go into are going to help you to get your creative out there more efficiently. So it's really important to identify exactly who your audience is.
Yeah, it's really important. Sometimes people will create messaging or an ad that's out there, and then they're not seeing those ads actually creating revenue for them, or a ROAS, or return on your initial spend. And there's a number of reasons for that. But if you have your messaging and audience completely off, like that, it can be your marketing. Your marketing's actually the problem. It's not the ad platform. I'd say for the most part, and probably we'd both agree that Facebook is really effective and efficient in advertising. So more often than not, if you're having a problem with ROAS or a problem with return on Facebook, it's your marketing.
Totally. And I mean, take a step back also and look at who your audience is and look at if your copy and your creative actually resonates with that specific audience. And as Heather pointed out to some of the numbers or the metrics that we look at, like ROAS, your cost per acquisition, it's going to give you a gauge as to whether that's being effective. And if it isn't, take a look. Is your product appealing to the 25 to 35-year-old young entrepreneur? Is it appealing to the 35-year-old mother who has kids? Is it appealing to a 65-year-old grandparent? All of these things are something that you need to take into consideration when you're actually deploying these assets across Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you don't want to be including something in your marketing that's just not important to the audience at hand, right? You don't want to be selling a tie-dye blanket to a 65-year-old when likely the millennial demographic currently is into tie-dye.
Yeah. And I think even like the jump ropes, it's a perfect example of when you're launching your creative, that creative is going to resonate with more of a fitness crowd. And when you start looking at the demographics and who those people are, you're going to start to define exactly what your targeting metrics need to be in Facebook and YouTube. So let's start with Facebook. Facebook has seen explosive growth, especially over the last few years, as they've been dialing in their machine learning, their algorithms, and really making it efficient and easy for marketers. And I use the term easy very loosely because there still are nuances to understanding algorithms and getting things to work on Facebook. But it's seen explosive growth specifically because of their targeting capabilities. There's so many different ways to reach customers and define audiences on Facebook that allow you to either go very broad and allow the machine learning to do the work of identifying who your customers are that are most likely to purchase, or you can go very narrow and really get granular with who these people are. So did they complete college? Do they have kids between the ages of 0 to 2 years old? There's tons of different targeting capabilities that we can go through, where I'll share my screen and go through some of the different capabilities that are available. So once we've identified ways to target our audiences, we're ready to launch some Facebook campaigns. And here at Raindrop, we do run media buying services for tons of our clients. And so we're going to unpack some of the top strategies that we use for deploying these assets on Facebook. The first rule that I always live by when launching a campaign is to test, and test some more. So 3 rules in one. When you're testing, there's so many different variables that need to be looked at because, as Heather had mentioned and as we had discussed, you could have fantastic creative, but if your audience is wrong, whether it's the age or the demographic or even the geographic location, if that's wrong on who you're targeting, then it's going to come across as that creative not working, which may not be the case. And so what we find is as we go through, ideally we have that customer persona identified, but there's going to be tweaking on different interests. There's going to be tweaking on different audiences that we're going to use to test and see what resonates with who.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that something in our experience that we've seen a lot of actually is, we talked about it before, but getting really niche or too niche and limiting yourself to everyone that you can be targeting on Facebook. And in some cases, going broader can be better. If you don't really know where to start, sometimes just letting the algorithm do the work for you and then tell you who's buying your product after you have some data is also a really great way to go. But it's nice that there are the 2 options. Like you can go niche if you really want to, if you're speaking to a hyper-targeted segment of your customers, or if you have no idea where to begin, sometimes testing broad also works.
Definitely. And as I had mentioned with Facebook's machine learning and their algorithms, it's gotten so advanced now where we've seen campaigns that have been launched to broad audiences where Facebook's algorithm essentially looks and finds these signals and identifies people who are most likely to be the customer, and it'll go after those specific pockets of people, and it can tend to convert very well. And that's just something that you would never know until you test. And the second rule that I live by on Facebook is retargeting. Facebook is absolutely incredible as a retargeting tool, and it allows companies to really think of retargeting in creative ways. So you can target so many different variables, whether it's someone who has spent a certain amount of time on your website and they fall into that top 25% of people by time spent, which could give you a couple different indicators. It could mean that they've done their research. They've looked on your website, they've looked at the products, gone through some reviews, and they've spent a sufficient amount of time on the site. That can be someone who's primed that you can then create a remarketing audience to, and then you can serve them different types of creative that would fall into that middle of funnel or bottom of funnel types of creative. All right, so next we're going to talk YouTube.
Ooh, the fun one.
Exactly. And this is Raindrop's specialty. This is where we have helped several clients scale past 100 million views. And it's done through a lot of the things that Heather touched on, the recipe that we use when creating our assets and creating our creative. There's a process to it. And especially in Jacques' episode where he touched on the exact creative process. So YouTube is a blue ocean when it comes to scaling, meaning there's tons of opportunity to reach new users, new customers, new clients. Now with that, with the huge opportunity, there comes a lot of
frustration.
Yeah, there comes a lot of frustration when it comes to actually finding those customers and having it be profitable. So YouTube can be a tough nut to crack.
Yeah. And we definitely think that the reason why this is just Facebook is a bit more advanced with their algorithm in general. Google's algorithm and the way it's set up currently, you'd think it's amazing because it's Google, right? But actually what we found and what a lot of our clients have found too, that they still have a long ways to go with their advertising capabilities on YouTube and their algorithm in general. It's kind of a loose cannon, so you have to steer it in the right direction, and it does take a long time. Or it can take a long time.
Definitely. It can take a lot of time and also a lot of money, especially if you don't have things structured correctly, which is going to be one of the areas that we go into and dive into with YouTube. So we're going to unpack a few different strategies that we've used to find success for our clients here at Raindrop. The first is utilizing YouTube's amazing targeting capabilities. So they have several different types of audiences that we use for targeting, and each one is different. So just at a high level, we have in-market audiences, we have affinity audiences, we can do keyword targeting, custom affinity, customer match, just to name a few. So the second tip is properly segmenting campaigns, targets, and objectives so you can see exactly what is working and focus your ad spend accordingly. Otherwise, with YouTube, I think a loose cannon is the perfect way to describe it. If you don't have things structured properly, then you can end up spending a ton of money and you won't be able to identify where the conversions happened, if any. So when we talk about some of these audiences, I had mentioned in-market, affinity audiences, and customer match. Those are some of the most popular that we use here at Raindrop, and we'll go into a little bit of detail on each. For in-market, that is exactly what it sounds like. So you're finding customers that are actually in the market for a product or service similar to yours. So you can imagine how valuable that is, targeting someone who, let's say you're selling sunglasses and you want to target someone who is in the market for sunglasses or fashion accessories or whatever it may be. You can literally nail down and drill down exactly who these customers are. For affinity segments, this is mostly for raising brand awareness and driving consideration with your video ads. And this basically reaches people who think of them as running in parallel along with your ad. So although they may not be in market, it could be someone that's interested in a topic or a subject that is similar to what your brand or service offers. For affinity audiences, think about someone that you want to target who may be into yoga. There's tons of different targeting capabilities that are there that you can leverage. So it could be fitness, it could be, vegetarian could fall into that type of a segment.
Or health food, maybe.
Exactly, health foods. Yeah. And so these are all things that you can create different audiences and different segments. And so each of these things that we all mentioned, you can actually put those in. And as your ad is spending money and it's serving to these audiences, if one doesn't convert, you can pause it or you can take it out or reduce spend to it. But you can identify out of all of these audiences who is actually converting. So that was a perfect live example of this, of how you can just sort of do a brain dump of what audiences may run in parallel with your brand or product, get those live, but structure them properly, and then see who's working and who's converting, and then trim the fat and take out who isn't converting. And the third type of audience that we're going to discuss today is a customer match audience. This is one of the most profitable because you're essentially matching your first-party customer data and offline data to reach or re-engage with your customers across YouTube and Google search. And so imagine taking a list of your customers or visitors, and you're able to create match lists on YouTube to then find lookalike types of audiences that you can market to.
Yeah, and for the lists that you're uploading into YouTube, they're your email lists normally. And you'll just want to export that from whatever email platform that you're using. And you can even take a segment of those high value customers. So sometimes you'll have the loyalists that are buying like every 3 months or as frequently as possible. And you want to upload those into YouTube. And then you're finding more customers that have similar attributes to your highest value customer list.
Totally. And even bringing that back to Facebook, because that brings up a good point of targeting. So Facebook has a type of targeting called LTV, where you can basically segment customers and create customer lookalike audiences or just regular custom audiences based on lifetime value. So if you want customers separated into a segment who have only spent $100 or more on your product or service, you can segment them. And so it's quite the same on YouTube.
Yeah, email list segmentation is huge and probably one of the most underutilized tools for creating other customer match lists, whether it be on YouTube or lookalike audiences on Facebook.
Yeah.
Now that we've given you a pretty cohesive summary of how to create a marketing message across Facebook and YouTube, we're going to dig into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty with some Q&A. So what's the best piece of advice that you'd give to someone that's setting up campaigns on Facebook for the very first time?
Yeah, so I would say two things. The first thing is structure. So ensuring that you have a campaign structure that is organized. It allows you to basically see by funnel state what's performing, what isn't performing, and allows you to scale, or it allows you to scale quickly and spend your money more efficiently. The second thing with Facebook would also be defining what your KPIs are. So what numbers and metrics are important to you? Is it engagement? Is it how many clicks or comments or how many people share a piece of content or an ad? Or is it how much revenue it drives? Or is it driving the lowest cost per acquisition or CPA? So defining your metric, without defining that, you're not going to be able to gauge the level of success on an ad. So Heather, where do you see most brands struggle when it comes to defining a strategy for their creative assets?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things that can go completely wrong. We mentioned it a bit earlier, but obviously the tone, your voice, the problem statement that's in your marketing, I think just the positioning and marketing in general, we've seen can be a big problem. And sometimes if you're starting pretty narrow with one defined interest, let's say on Facebook, it can be the completely wrong message to the wrong audience, and then you're having to start over. Or sometimes people spend too long spinning their wheels ultimately to get one audience or one message to work. And that's just not the right equation. I think with any e-commerce startup or e-commerce business, there's so much testing and iteration that comes into play. And if after 2 weeks something isn't working, stop doing it. Stop doing it, pause it, start with something new, get some new messaging in there, target a different audience, and see what happens from there.
Heather, what about falling in love with a piece of creative, or when there's a client that really wants that piece of creative to work, but we've tried our testing, we've tried adjusting audiences. What do you suggest doing from there?
Yeah, so at that point, it can be a higher level strategy or issue that is more related to either the product market fit or your positioning completely. So it might just be that the product that you have right now, or what you deem as being important to that product, isn't resonating with the customer, or there's a market issue where there's just not enough demand out there right now. When that's the case and your marketing can't be very succinct, you have to actually go back and educate and convince the customer on why that product actually matters. So it's not so much speaking to a direct problem statement that Tanner might have, maybe there's sand that gets stuck to your towel, right? But you might not even know, is sand getting stuck to my towel an issue at all? So there's this whole education component that comes into play. Or, cardio not being an effective workout. That's another really good one. But telling the customer that, hey, you're actually not getting the best workout by running, and this could cause some joint problems or isn't going to feel very good on your body. I would say go back and just look at the market in general and understand if you need to do more education first. So I do want to talk a bit about organic social media and organic content in general, but does organic content affect the performance of your paid social ads?
Totally. So I think I see organic as sort of the foundation of any brand. Any sort of organic posting, any sort of organic assets that you create and share it's only going to help to boost the paid ads that you create. And it might not be direct. For example, if someone sees an organic post, they may not get served a paid creative.
Yeah.
And so there isn't necessarily a one-to-one, but it can help in retargeting. So if people see an organic post and they're engaging and they're already seeing your brand organically, they're much more likely to then engage in a paid advertisement. And let's say they see an organic post that drives to a homepage or a product page on a website. Those people are then put into a custom audience, if you have it set up correctly, that in your paid ads, they're going to start getting served from. So it can only help.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that we've done in the past is with your organic content, the whole goal is to get it out there to as many people that are following your page or their friends of fans to use organic content as an acquisition channel. It actually can be used that way.
Totally.
And with the boosting capabilities that are out there, that's part of your paid strategy. So usually you can put some dollars behind boosting an organic piece of content, like a video, for instance. And then in those engagement audiences, you're creating custom engagement audiences based on how many people viewed like 50% of your video or 75% of your video. So that's how I like to look at organic content, but organic content fuels your paid social strategy. Another thing too is if you're just a brand that's only advertising, let's say on YouTube, and you don't have any organic content on your channel at all, I believe that your ads actually won't perform as well. So if you have a following and subscribers and people are actually looking to your channel for advice and useful information, I personally think, just from what we've seen, that it can create a lift in your ads, and people will deem that channel as something that's resourceful and actually providing valuable information. That's what people are coming to YouTube for to begin with.
For sure. And especially with YouTube, YouTube will deem your channel as sort of like an authority figure if there's already those organic signals of you putting up organic content and people engaging with it. It's getting views. People are sticking on for a certain amount of time. So it can only help and look really good in the eyes of YouTube for then when you start launching your paid assets.
Yeah, absolutely. We never like to look at paid social just in its own little silo. It needs to work with your holistic marketing mix and especially your content strategy. Like, content strategy is so important across paid and organic.
So when it comes to actually getting this creative out and in front of people, is it always necessary for a brand to have a plan about what that looks like?
So this is an interesting question, and I truly think, like, one, you always want to have some sort of a plan or a roadmap that you're following with your marketing and knowing, like, what you're creating next. Ultimately, it takes time to create content. We know that here. From the beginning of a project to the end can be a few weeks. So I like to have a plan and a roadmap, but also leaving room to be nimble. Sometimes there's a change in the dynamics of the world or the environment that you're in, and you need to change the conversation. So your plan is irrelevant at this point, and as long as you're being nimble with your marketing strategy and allowing yourself to create different creative that can address those problems of what's going on in the world in general, or issues or hot topics that are being discussed, you want to be very conscious of that. I mean, messaging is so key. And yeah, so I think being as nimble as possible and just being really conscious of what's going on in the world and your environment is so key. I've personally loved brands like Lululemon or Nike, and they're bigger, of course, but even smaller brands I've seen have addressed issues right on and shared their perspective, or if they've messed up and potentially hurt or offended somebody, they're acknowledging that. And transparency creates trust, and trust creates brand building.
Yeah, and I think smaller businesses have a unique ability and a unique opportunity when it comes to adjusting and adapting, because they don't have all these bigger pieces that a brand like Nike or Adidas may have. And so they can adapt much quicker to changes in the environment, changes in culture, and just really adapt to a changing environment.
Yeah, so to round out that question, it's definitely important to have a marketing roadmap and a plan and understand what creative you're trying to implement over the coming months, or what, your paid social plan is. If you see something working, you also want to remain nimble to iterate off of that, or to go back in the feedback loop and maybe revise a piece of creative or content because of the times, right? So I think that I've definitely paid attention a lot to what smaller brands are doing and bigger brands alike. But as long as you can stay nimble and adjust quickly, and also just stay conscious, be conscious of the times and what's happening in the world. So Tanner, how often do you recommend optimizing your campaigns on paid social?
Yeah, so I have time set aside every morning where I actually go in and I do a performance check on all the campaigns. So depending on how many different things that you have live, I would recommend doing it daily. The nice thing about Facebook specifically, I know YouTube has some capabilities as well, is that you can actually create what's called rules and that run automatically in the background. And so you don't need to sit there and optimize a campaign at all hours of the night, because at the end of the day, these campaigns are running at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, or maybe not, but they're running even when we're not. So when we clock out, there's still money that's being spent, and there's still campaigns that are being ran. And so there's different rules that you can set. So let's say a campaign is not performing and it has a CPA that is double our target. What you can do is you can actually create a rule that will pause that ad set or kill that ad set off so that you don't need to go in and manually do it. And this is especially helpful when you have, let's say, 50 ad sets or 100 ad sets that are running, and you're not going to go in and check each one individually. And so having rules is super beneficial, but I always recommend going in maybe once a day or a couple times a day, especially if you're running your own ads, to just do a health check on what's running.
Yeah. And it seems like it's so obviously so nice that Facebook can do that for you and automate all of that. But at the same time, it's a machine and it's not perfect. Like there's errors in it. And granted, as humans, we can't be up all night, like looking at every single campaign. So you can rely on Facebook for a lot of it, but you have to spot check. It's not perfect.
And so it's funny because there was actually a recent issue with Facebook where they were double counting conversions. And so a lot of people that had these rules in place, let's say to increase budget by 25% at X amount of conversions, it was ramping up their budget without having actual data.
Oh no.
And so that's an issue that you can run into with these rules. And so that's why I always recommend just always being on top of it and keeping an eye on your ads.
Yeah, nice.
So what sort of an impact can the right creative and the right assets have on a brand?
Oh man, I mean, we've seen it before with some of our personal clients that we work with here at Raindrop, but it can be game changing for a business. I mean, once you finally figure out what that equation is, it's just growth and scale from there. What's really awesome about some of the top of funnel content that we create on YouTube and even on Facebook is that's creating and helping create that connection with your audience. And once you build that relationship with those customers, they're getting to know you across those platforms. And then they can find that they really love your brand. They know what content that you're putting out. They know what they can expect. And you're just building that connection with them for the long term. And once you build relationships with your customers and then continuously nurture that relationship through other cross-channel strategies like email, you're only going to grow from there. So we've seen that creative paired with the right audience and message can be really game changing for our clients. And once you're starting to even see some engagement and performance on an asset or a creative, you're just able to spend a lot more, and that creative can have a long life, especially on YouTube where video content is king, and engaging video content that provides helpful how-tos and that's edutaining. It definitely has a long lifespan. So that's the first place to start, and you can just grow from there.
So what does our feedback loop look like here at Raindrop?
Yeah, what's really nice is now that we have our own in-house media buying team that's specializing in e-commerce and D2C media and also branded media in general, it's great because we get that feedback instantaneously. We're able to go into all the ads accounts and just look at any given moment how our creative's performing. And what we like to do regularly is not only dive in, we're optimizing campaigns, but take a look at the creative and create our hypothesis around why it performs or why it isn't performing. And there's definitely key metrics and indicators that you can look at and kind of backtrack in Facebook and YouTube to understand what it is about the ad that's not working. And then from there, educating our creative team and our copy team. So if it's a copy issue and maybe the call to action's not strong or the copy in the actual ad isn't strong, we can go back and give them some feedback and share our learnings and why we think it's not working. And then same thing with design and video. We love to look at performance all the time and like get our team excited and rallied around the strong video performance. But if there's something that needs to be revised or edited in a video, we're pretty quick to turn that around. So we can take all that information, and if we need to make a recut of it, we'll just send it right back into editing and motion graphics and maybe tighten up the intro or adjust some of the messaging at the very beginning of the video so it can actually have that big hit on Facebook. It's also nice because in general, the core of a video, from like the middle of the video or even the first quarter of the video to the end, you won't change much, if at all. But then revising the intros and just coming up with different iterations of that is awesome. And you can see that just by putting one extra asset into Facebook or YouTube can really improve performance if you're seeing a bit of a lull. So it's really nice to have that iterative loop, and we're trying to educate each other as much as possible on why something worked or why it didn't.
Yeah, and it's amazing having all of the teams in-house, from copy to creative so that we can when I'm running ads on the brand side, can see what's working. I can talk to our designers and developers who are creating the landing pages and the websites, and we can make tweaks very quickly to get things to work.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll see if our ads are really working well and people just aren't converting. Like, that's usually a website issue. So we have awesome designers in-house. We have a full development team in-house, and we're able to talk about slight optimizations that we can make to just make that customer experience so much better. I mean, customer experience in D2C e-commerce is literally number one. It's key, but you just want to make sure that your full picture from creative to ad to going to the landing page and checkout is as smooth as possible. Awesome. I think that's it. Okay, so we'll just close it out. Little outro?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this second episode in our webinar series. We're so grateful to have you here with us, and there's definitely more information and insights from Raindrop to come, so stay tuned next week for episode 3, and you can find all of this great content on our YouTube channel at Raindrop Marketing.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.